1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have enough to, I think we have a quorum, don't
Yes. Yep.
we? Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? I will start by reading the virtual meeting statement. So good morning. Due to the governor's recent orders, all members of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee are participating virtually today. And for virtual meetings, the committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. And at that time, they will be recognized and will be unmuted. When there's a vote, it will be necessary to take a roll call vote. The committee member will be recognized and will raise their hand and state their vote. Today's meeting is a public meeting, and per the notice published on, I'm not sure what the date of the notice was, but per the notice that was published, citizens can listen to the meeting if they contacted the city manager's office to make the necessary arrangements. A recording of today's meeting will be available by Monday on the city's website at www.cityofws.org. Okay, going into today's agenda, which I've got to pull up. Let's see, here it is right here. First order of business, I'm sure, is to approve the minutes from November 18th and January 27th. Has everybody had a chance to read and go through those minutes?
Yes.
Does anyone have any comments, corrections, anything of that nature?
Yeah, I talked too much on January 27th.
Not at all.
Yeah, you made the meeting go too long, Brian. Just kidding, just kidding, just kidding.
Move approval.
Okay, I have a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, do we need to do a roll call vote for this, Patrice?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, can we, or Heather, are you calling the roll?
Yes, I can call the roll. Mark
Thank you.
Dunnigan,
Approve?
Gail Anderson,
Approve.
Brian Heelan,
Approved.
Melissa Vickers,
Approve.
Reverend Paul Ford, Brenda Diggs,
Approve.
Bill Hayes, Mabel Stevenson.
Okay, thank you. So the meeting minutes are approved for both of those previous meetings. And now we will go into our project updates. And Robert, you're the first one listed. Do you want to go first?
Well, I'll pull up a presentation and we can just kind of go through it there.
Perfect.
Yeah, give me 1 minute to pull that up. All right. Can you all see the agenda?
I see the
Or sorry,
minutes.
minutes. Yep. Okay. Now, and now we can see the presentation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So the first one, we have one leftover recreation bond project that's managed by our Department of Transportation. So I'll let Tanique McCullough, our transportation director, start off on that one.
Good morning, everyone. The Strollway Renovations is a project to rehab approximately 3,900 linear feet of the Strollway, and the rehab included resurfacing, decorative chip seal, some bridge and handrail repairs, some minor tree trimming, street light maintenance, which included paintings of some of the street light poles, installing bike racks, and repairing some of the existing and damaged bike racks and signs. The overall budget for this project was $1 million, and the phase that is currently under construction is budgeted for $595,611. And I think you can go to the next slide, Heather. So the current status is the project is under construction, and all work on the project is completed except the final layer of resurfacing or the chip seal, which is scheduled to occur this spring. The contractor was unable to finish it before the weather conditions got to the point that the weather conditions got too cold, so they will continue it this spring. And then the next steps would be to utilize the balance of the funding to install a sidewalk along Watown Street to connect the Strollway. It says to the nearby school, but it's to the School of the Arts. And we have not begun the work on that phase. And then Heather, if you can go to the next slide. So what I've shown here are some pictures of some of the improvements which were made. The picture to the left shows some improvements to the bridge structures. We did have the contractor to go in and replace some of the wooden planks and then make improvements to the bridge rails. And then the picture on the right, you can see the new lighting. All of the light poles were repainted with new green paint. On the right of that picture, you will see where we have installed some new benches, and the trees have been trimmed, and the Strollway path has had some improvements. I can answer any questions if you have any.
Therese, how did we do on budget? I know you said it was budgeted at 595,000. Are we on track to hit that?
Yes, yes, we are.
Good. It looks great.
Yeah. Just a general question. Does the city have like a repair fund for strollways and greenways when they're damaged, or does it have to go into these kind of funds?
I think someone else would have to answer that. I think most of the funding and the repairs on the strollways are maintained by our Parks and Recs department, but this was I guess a larger scale project to include the repairs to the bridges and the major paving, and so that was why it was a capital project and being managed by us.
Yeah, so regarding the greenway repairs and maintenance, Recreation, Tanika's correct, Recreation and Parks does manage that. We usually try to fund it as part of our 2/3 bonds funding every other year. When we do those, we use 2/3 bonds. It's basically statutorily, we're allowed to reissue some of the bond funds that we pay off every year. And so when we do that, those funds go for maintenance across the city on all different city buildings and facilities. And that's sort of the main purpose that we use those for is general maintenance and upkeep on a bunch of different things. So that presents a little bit of a challenge because you have greenways competing against all of our other parks and rec facilities, all of our like fire stations and other government buildings. But Recreation does maintain a project for that in our capital improvement plan.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So next up, we get into our streets and sidewalks bond projects. And I think our first project is going to be presented by Keith Huff, our Director of Field Operations.
So yeah, good morning all. This is the street resurfacing component. As you're all probably aware, the city maintains almost 2,200 lane miles of hard surface streets. And this particular project calls for resurfacing of city streets throughout the community with the effort of improving citizen commute. Earmark for this particular segment was 13.6 million. And the process we went through, or transportation went through and now transitioned to field operations, where streets were selected for resurfacing based on their overall street rating. And then each council member was presented a list of streets and within their respective ward, and upon their approval, that was locked into the contract request. And the contracts were broken down into bond contract number 1 and bond contract number 2. Heather, if you move forward for us. And just by the way, the streets that you're seeing to the right are the kind of the finished product, and some of these were done under the bond contract number 1. Some were done under bond contract number 2. Just a hodgepodge of major, minor, and residential streets. So as far as the current status, bond contract number 1 was started July 24th of 19, and was completed July 10th of 2020. We immediately went into bond contract number 2 in 2020, and that contract was awarded to APAC Atlantic. Pre-bid for that contract was conducted on August 6th. However, we were into the full effects of COVID at that point in time, so the contractor wasn't able to start work on number 2 until October of last year. They worked until December, where the plant shut down, like Ms. McCullough mentioned for the other projects. Plants kind of shut down for maintenance in the cold weather, so they stopped work. We have had conversations with the contractor for expectations of this year, and they are expected to commence again in April, so in a week and change. And expected completion of the base contract for number 2 is December of this year. And I'll go into more explanation on what we mean by base contract. So as far as the breakdown, again, beginning balance 13.6 million. Bond contract number 1 exhausted almost 6 million of that. Base contract for number 2 was 4.7 million and change, leaving us an estimated balance of almost 3 million. Last year, when we bid bond contract number 2, we got very favorable rates from APAC. So we're invoking a change here. So Heather, if you would, please. So our next steps with the remaining money is to pursue a change order to contract number 2. Because we've got such favorable rates in contract number 2, we're pursuing the change order. So we're compiling a list of streets. That list of streets has been presented to each council member. Minor edits are underway, some residential streets that the council members wanted to get into their respective boards, and we are going to try to take a change order to our existing number 2 contract in April for approval to exhaust those remaining funds. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Keith,
Keith,
it's Gail.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Because we're able to add these additional streets, can you give us a sense of what is left on the list of, the magnitude of what might be left? Because I know this is an item in the bond when we were selling the bonds that everybody has their favorite street. And I'm not looking for a specific list, but have we accommodated most of the ones that rated the lowest in terms of, the highest in terms of needs with this addition?
Gail, there's still a number of streets we need to get to. The city has a goal of having 85% of their streets at an 85 street rating or better. So this will go a long way to helping reach that goal, but there's still a lot of demand out there.
Okay. I was afraid of that. I was afraid you'd tell me that.
Yeah, Keith, this is Brenda Diggs. I have a couple of questions. The demand to have streets resurfaced east of town, can you, and I know this goes before the council, but there's been quite a bit of criticism. Some of it, of course, has been posted on social media about the city not maintaining the streets, particularly East Winston. And so I know that all of this is about funding. In this package of money, the bucket of money that you will be getting from the, as a result of the bill, is there any that would be appropriated for street repairs? And maybe if you don't know, does anyone know if there's any money there? And how do you begin to deal with some of this? Because it really gives our city a black eye when you see this out in the public domain that our streets are terrible.
Hey, Brenda, can you clarify your question? Are you talking about the American Recovery Act, the coronavirus relief bill, or are you talking about
the $77 million that I heard the other night the city is going to get? Would any of that be used for street resurfacing, for example?
So I can respond to that, Brenda. Right now, we're waiting on guidance from the Treasury Department. There are specific uses that are spelled out in the legislation. Basically, they kind of lay out this way. You can use the money for dealing with the impacts of the pandemic, both from a health perspective and an economic perspective. So providing support to small businesses or households. You can use the funds to provide bonuses to employees. You can use the funds for water, sewer, and broadband, and you can use the funds to restore any revenue that was lost in trying to provide services. So, so right now it's not clear to us, the details behind those eligible uses. So we're waiting on that guidance. We know that the Biden administration is preparing an infrastructure package, and there could be opportunities to secure some funding through that for transportation related projects. So so at this point, it's just unclear, how much of the American Rescue Plan Act funds can be used for capital expenditures like this.
And who maintains, when you turn off of Stratford Road, not Stratford, Haynes Mall. No, it is Stratford. Yeah, I think it is. What's Thruway on Stratford Road?
Right.
Yes.
When you turn off of Stratford Road into Haynes Mall, into the section there where Dick's is, Olive Garden and Dick's, there is a hole that is so deep that you would tear up your car. Who maintains that?
Yeah, Brenda, that once it goes into Haynes Mall, those are considered private streets and they are maintained by the property owner of record. I know that the hole that you're talking about, it's right at the railroad tracks.
Yes, I mean, can the city not give them a fine or a ticket or something? Because it's unreal.
Yeah, I wish we could, but those are not owned, operated, and maintained by the city. So unfortunately, we don't have purview over that.
Thank you.
Question, how much money beyond the 13.6 and the 2018 bond program is needed, or do we think is needed to kind of meet the goal and maybe even go beyond it of 85 at 85?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Scott Tesh and myself were talking about this just the other day, and some broad off the cuff numbers. We're in the $10 to $15 million a year range.
To improve and maintain.
To improve and try to reach that goal of 85.
So for how many years?
For the foreseeable future.
And what is in the budget presently?
This is,
Go
sorry.
ahead. Heather.
Okay, this is another area where we do budget some amount for street repairs every year. The funding sources are the Powell bill or gas tax funds. Those get appropriated every year. And then every other year when we do those 2/3 bonds, we were talking about, those also get funded, get some 2/3 funding. Do you have any to add to that, Keith?
Yeah, that's it. That's what we're relying on now, aside from a bond earmark, is our annual Powell bill reserves. So,
And so what's the shortfall, if you can just estimate what we normally get?
I'm trying to pull up the capital improvement plan right now, actually, to answer that question.
Let me ask another one then. Do any of the council members have any concerns about the spread of the 13,600,000 from the bond program across the wards? Has there been concern raised beyond the citizenry by the elected officials that there may be issues with, maybe one section of town getting more bond money than another section?
Well, there are some people, I know of some people that have expressed that. I mean, I'm certain some of the council members have heard it, as well as the mayor, because as I said, there is open criticism
Yes.
about the distribution of funds. And even as I went through looking at the various streets that were listed in the deck for today, I mean, it points out a disparity. Now, whether that is because of the traffic flow or whatever, but I see that bullet point that says that the list it's compiled and it is reviewed with the council members. But I guess I'm still questioning, is that list prepared? Do you move forward on the street resurfacing and then step back, or, I mean, to the council? Because there is a disparity.
Yeah,
And
as
there are
far as,
people that think that in our community that do believe that the funding is not equal, or that West Side gets more attention than East Side or South.
understood. As far as the sequence goes, I can say that what has been done and what we are doing now is a list is compiled. The breakdown as far as cost per lane mile is given, and the council member of the respective ward is basically given that list ahead of time, pre any contract. They make any amendments that they feel are necessary for the street segments in their ward, and it only moves forward upon their blessing.
So if you guys are looking at the screen share, I've pulled up, this is the current year's, so this is fiscal year 21's capital improvement plan, the page for street resurfacing, just so you can see sort of the typical funding amounts. And so the amounts that we budget, like in the gasoline tax revenue, that's the Powell bill money, that can shift. We budget about 1.1 million. But like, you know, you see in the current year, we were expecting a little bit more. So that does shift based on the actual revenue that we receive. But we kind of put in a placeholder budget. And then we typically budget 1.5 million in those 2/3 sort of maintenance bonds as every year that we do those.
So it's woefully underfunded.
Based on what Keith's described as the need, yes, our funding does not match that need.
And I know this commission's business isn't, the annual, budget and things like that. But I mean, I guess when I hear what Brenda's saying, and to be honest with you, Brenda, I have absolutely no doubt that what you're saying is accurate. I mean, I think there's people in the West Ward who think certain sections of the West Ward get too much new pavement. But I guess this is one of the first times since this commission where there's like, it's kind of been put right up in front of my face that, maybe it's not fairly being distributed. And that's kind of what I think one of the major goals of our commission was, to make sure that the monies are being fairly distributed throughout the city. But the description of how the process goes, where each of the council members, is, I'm assuming, coordinating with each other and happy with it. I don't know, what else can be done at this point, other than obviously we need to find more money.
The squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Well, I would ask maybe Heather for our next meeting, if you could do a little research and just let's understand how the amount of money is distributed, because I can tell you, just sort of being in this world all the time, the dollar figure and the number of streets don't always go together. You can have some resurfacing projects that are just more expensive than other resurfacing projects are, and things of that nature. So I think that Brian, you're right, and just Brenda, you are as well. We just need to have some sense of, equitable distribution of the funds, and then how the council members elect to use those is really up to the council members at that point in time.
Well, and the people don't always know. See, that's the other side of this. The people do not always know the dollars and cents, or know that there is less money, or what the decision criteria is. But there are some voices out there that are very loud and vocal, some of which you all probably have read about, that challenge the mayor and the council. But, again, the masses don't know. They just think that it is.
Right.
And I think that's the reason for this commission.
This is not new, Brian. It's not.
Yeah.
New.
No, I'm sure it's not.
Keith, I was curious on the change order that we're looking at to add more streets to this particular component. Do the contractors index those? I mean, do we have a risk in prices going up?
Yeah, the contract has a hydrocarbon. Asphalt, as you probably know, is rock and oil. And as oil changes in price, so could the contract as far as a asphalt or a liquid modifier. So it can go up, but what we're trying to do is, because the rates are so favorable now, we're trying to lock in those rates with the contractor and move forward.
Okay.
Keith, are you saying that the streets that we saw in the deck with the change order would include others other than those?
Correct. We are going to, the list that's been put in front of the council, and I want to say that they're equally distributed among each ward. The lane miles and the cost respectively. We try to equalize those among each ward and then move forward to discussions or one-on-ones with the council members.
You don't have that list to show us today, do you?
No, because the council members are still modifying that list. There are streets that they're taking on and putting off at their request.
Okay.
And the whole goal is equity among the council members. And that's where sometimes it can deviate from a priority-based assessment to a council member request item, where they can take a street off that's rated a 26 and put on a street that's a 42 because they've gotten more complaints from their constituents on it.
So once that change is made, does the entire council vote on it?
Correct. An item would be taken to the city council. This would be a change order request to APEC, their contract, and the list of streets proposed, the ward, the linear footage would be put in as an exhibit with that change order request.
Okay.
But until we do so, we would have those one-on-ones. We would make sure each council member is happy with the list of streets that's in their respective ward before it moves forward to any action.
And that holds up the work for the entire project?
Well, they're still going on the base contract. The base contract for bond contract number 2 will extend through this year, through this paving season. They're working on that base contract. The change order would be done prospectively next paving season. So like we talked about, the contractor will shut down presumably December of this year and then pick up in the spring again. Those change order streets would be on the spring of next year timeframe.
Wow.
And just one last thing, Keith, as the council makes those decisions and they're finalized, will you ask the marketing communication staff to do its best to get that information out to the public? Because I'll just tell you, having worked the bond campaigns forever, this is the most hot button issue that we ever faced. People just, as you know,
You
and
drive
so,
on them.
yeah, they need to understand what the process was, and the fact that it was all reviewed and council members, made their decisions, et cetera. I think the more we can communicate that to people, the better it'll help us next time.
I'll be with this kind, as much discussion as we've had, so you know what the people out there.
Yes.
Yeah, and to be honest with you guys, I've got another process question, and I don't want to belabor it, Keith, but so the spread of the dollars, the equity of the dollar spread is really viewed as equity between wards versus, a compiled list of the top 100 streets that need repaving. I mean, I'm making up a number there.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just say there's a ward that really is much, much better paved. They're still going to get the same amount of money to repave. And a different ward who has, 27s and 42s is.
Well, there is plenty of streets in every ward that rank poorly.
Okay.
When we did this initially, when we were for the previous commission that looked at what the projects of the bond were going to be, this number is going to be wrong, Brian, but I think it's directionally correct. I think this amount represented like 10%. The 13.6 represented like 10% of what was actually on the need list.
Right. Okay. So there's streets in every ward that are like, that need be repaved.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we struggled, Brian, to try to put more money into that. But then, there, we had all the bond categories, and if, we could only go to 100 million. So we put as much, I think, into transportation as we possibly could.
Okay.
Would it be helpful to see kind of I know it's been updated, Keith, but what we have in the playbook? I mean, because initially it was divided equally by ward, like 1.7 million. And there are lists of streets and the pavement condition rating.
Yes, so the playbook has all the streets in bond contract number 1 and base contract number 2.
Right.
The only thing it's omitting is the change order streets that we're working with the council members on now.
And again, the goal will be for that remaining 2+ million to be equitably distributed between the wards.
Correct, same process, ward centric.
Okay.
The concern that I have is this will be the change order process has to take place and it's next year. What if there's a situation that needs to be addressed this year?
When you say situation,
I mean, what if there's a street that is so desperate that it needs to be addressed in this year rather than spring of 22?
So Brenda, I'm going to pull back up the street resurfacing project. So we budgeted 1.8 million of non-2018 bond money for street resurfacing for FY21. So the bond project that Keith was just talking about that had contract 1, contract 2, and the change order is only part of the street resurfacing money the city has available to spend this fiscal year. So we have Powellville streets, and Keith has crews out doing the gas tax Powellville, spending that money. And so we've got those funds available as well for other projects. And that's I believe, Keith, one of the ways that you handle sort of like quote unquote emergency repairs, like a giant pothole has opened up.
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
If there's an emergency fix, if there's an emergency issue, then there's a couple ways we can go about it. Exactly. One, like Heather mentioned, we can use in-house crews for resurfacing. But if there's a true emergency that requires a lane closure or some capital funds be diverted, the city manager and the city attorney can do an emergency authorization of use of funds where you don't have to necessarily go to council. We do a retroactive notification to council after the fact. So if it's a true emergency, the city manager and the city attorney can authorize the use of funds to resolve those issues. Should they have or need a funds declaration for an emergency issue.
Okay, good. That's good to know.
But even for non-emergency repairs, we also have this 1.8 million that was appropriated for sort of ongoing street resurfacing, street maintenance.
Okay, because sometimes the wheels move slowly. Yeah.
So I've pulled up here, like Patrice is talking about, our list of streets that are published in the playbook. So we've got these are listed by ward. You can see the contract 1. Some of the streets for contract 2, I think that was added to and amended as they got into that. And these are in here for each ward. And like Keith mentioned, this isn't a complete list yet of those. We need to go back and update some of them. But you can kind of see some of the roads that we're focused on.
Wow, I mean, there are some roads that are rated 15 in Winston-Salem.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
There's a 1.
Oh my gosh.
There's a 12.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me just ask a question because I'm new to this game. How does a road get rated a 1? How did it get bypassed in all the previous years to not be repaved, to all of a sudden on this report be a 1?
So
I need someone, I mean, how is that possible?
Yeah. So roads deteriorate at different rates. Obviously 100 is a brand new just recently done the asphalt steel cooling road. A 1 is basically a gravel or dirt road. These
Oh, it's
things-
never been paved.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of these things, and in this change order, we're looking at some BST streets. You heard the term chip seal used before.
Mhm.
Rock Hill, Casa Vista. Those are some streets that were put on the list where historically they have ADTs or traffic counts that are so low, you might only have 1 or 2 cars a day using them. So it's a function of how many cars are using them in addition to the condition of the road and everything like that. So if they only have 1 or 2 cars, if it only serves 1 house, is the need there versus a Glen Avenue or your majors or collectors. So those are factors in that come into it as well.
Thanks for that explanation, Keith.
Yes, sir.
That's great to see the playbook.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the requests that I've heard, just to sort of echo those back to make sure we're ready for future meetings, we want to have some more discussion on street resurfacing and kind of the process that is used to identify what streets we show to council, to kind of and talk about the way that different roads are prioritized, how we allocate funds between wards. We want to see the final list of bond contract number 2 change order streets when that list is complete. Does that sound accurate to CBOC members? I'm seeing nods. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
what I
All right.
heard.
Yes.
Great. If you guys are good, I'm going to move on from street resurfacing to our next project.
Thanks, Keith.
You're welcome.
All right. So
Thank
next up, we have concrete-based street rehab, and this goes back to Tanique McCullough, our Director of Transportation.
Good morning again. The concrete-based street rehab projects, $6,230,000 was allocated to this project to replace roadways which were originally constructed with concrete and with asphalt. And I don't have any pictures to share with you for this, but basically we are in the design process of this, about to advertise for construction next month. If you go to the next slide, Heather, the roadways which were originally on the list are Arbor Road from Robin Hood Road to Country Club, Biting from Club Park to Westview, East 5th Street from North Liberty to Brandon Lane, Fairfax Drive from Windsor to the dead end, Lynn Avenue from Windsor to Greenwich, Windsor Road from Plymouth to Fairfax, and 2 others, Woodbine Road from Westover to Buena Vista, and 18th Street from North Liberty to dead end. So what we've basically done is we've worked cooperatively with the engineering department and our TFO group to do further inspections on these roadways, roadway cores, looking at the existing utilities, and putting together a full package for replacement of these roadways. A few of the roadways, such as 18th Street, for instance, was determined that the asphalt base had been removed, and so we just added them to the resurfacing list rather than keeping them on this list. So as I mentioned, we are finalizing the some of the base repairs that needed to occur on these roadways and about to advertise it. The advertisement goes out in April for a May award.
So again, these roads are concrete roads presently.
They're concrete roads presently, yes.
Okay.
All right, our next slide and project would be our Polo Road improvements. And this project has to relate to improving traffic flow and making pedestrian and bicycle improvements on Polo Road between Wake Drive and Long Drive. The original budget was $3.6 million, And the project is currently in the design process. And we have determined that with the phase of designs that we've completed, that we actually have more budget available to make the sidewalk improvements and other improvements along the corridor. And so we are looking at using the funding to install a median on Polo Road between Long Drive and Friendship Circle, and making some other roadway improvements, including adding bicycle lanes and some traffic calming along Polo Road from University Parkway to Long Drive, on Polo Road between University Parkway and Long Drive. So we've initiated a change order with the design consultant to make those improvements. And once they do that and they've completed the design, we will then be ready to go under construction. And we anticipate that even with adding that additional work, we will still come in under budget.
And Councilman McIntosh is in agreement on all this?
Yes, we've actually, this project is in 2 wards with Councilmember McIntosh and Mayor Pro Tem Adams. And we've kept them both informed, and they are both on board with the recommended changes that are being made. Our next project, Liberty Main 2-way conversion, is a project that came about during the Business 40 or Salem Parkway improvement project. We worked with a consultant to look at locations along Liberty Main, and then we'll talk about another project, 1st and 2nd Street, and converting them to 2-way. This project in portion is $3.6 million. The project is currently, the design is complete. Liberty Main conversion goes all the way from MLK to where Liberty merges with Old Salem Road, and some improvements will extend almost to Academy. The design is complete, but this project construction is on hold because the 1st and 2nd Street conversion project is currently under construction, and some of the same detours that would be needed for the Liberty Main construction would coincide with those on 1st and 2nd. So we're doing 1st and 2nd first, and once those are complete, then we will roll into the Liberty Main 2-way conversion project.
Those are big projects.
Yes. Next slide, please. The Business 40 Corridor Enhancements project is funding to improve or to provide betterments which were not funded in the 1st phase of our Business 40 Corridor improvements. And so some of the betterments that we identified would be to include a clear noise wall on the east side of Peace Creek Parkway, some monument foundations for arts on bridges, artwork, some pedestrian level lighting within the corridor, and some enhanced landscaping. The budget for this is $3.8 million. The current status is we are finalizing the design scope with a consultant so that they can begin the design work. This project was delayed because of the Business 40 project and the changes that were made with the scope of work with that project when NCDOT faced some funding issues. And so we were not sure if all of the enhancements that were in that project were going to be completed. So we held off to see if anything needed to roll into this project. And fortunately, as far as the all of the work that was committed with the Business 40 project was completed except the MUP construction. So we are now finalizing the scope and coordinating with NCDOT and the landscape work that they will be doing with their project. And we should get this design work started no later than April. I did include some pictures of the Business 40 corridor enhancements, which were included in the first project, just to remind everyone of the collaborative work that occurred with the City of Winston-Salem, NCDOT, Creative Corridors Coalition, and the Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership and others, just to enhance Business 40 so that it became more of just a roadway improvement project, but something of a showcase for our city. So the picture on the left shows the Green Street Bridge, the double tied arch pedestrian bridge over Salem Parkway. This bridge was one of the collaborative works with Creative Corridors, actually contributing to the cost of the design of the bridge. But what you also will see in that picture are improvements, the fence along the bridge itself, but also the wrought iron fencing along the corridor. You will also see some of the brick texturing along the corridor and other things that really just make the whole area just a lot more appealing. And then the picture on the right is a picture of the multi-use path on the Peters Creek Parkway Bridge with the transparent noise wall on the, I guess that's the east side, because we're going to have improvements on the west side. So, and I'm sorry, that's the west side. Our improvements will be on the east. But just to give some visuals of some of the work that occurred along the corridor and some of the investment that was made in collaboration with the city, Creative Corridors, and NCDOT. And I think there's some additional pictures on the next slide, which is just a picture of the actual corridor itself. And what you can see in this picture on the left is the corridor for the MUP, the open archway. So they did make some improvements to make provisions for the multi-use path. However, NCDOT was not able to include the actual construction of the multi-use path in their project when some changes to legislation occurred and when they experienced some financial issues and were unable to make any change orders to any projects that were currently under construction. But you will also see the Broad Street Bridge itself and the arch facade of the bridge, how the girders are actually painted black, so the archways are actually more discernible and visual as you're driving along the corridor. The additional fencing, wrought iron black fence along the corridor, the brick wallways along the corridor. So overall, great project, I think. And I think that might be the last slide for that one.
Janine, do we anticipate that we might get those DOT funds restored for the multi-use path in the future?
So what I will, I think the multi-use path is one of the projects I'm updating today. And what happened is the funding that we had allocated to contribute to the Business 40 project with NCDOT rolled back over to the city. And so now the city is actually going to manage that project and complete the construction.
Thank you. I got ahead of you, I guess. I apologize.
That's okay.
Do you want to skip to the MUP now, Tanique, or do you want to do the other two-way conversion first?
I can do the other one and then come back to it unless there's a preference of the committee. The first and second two-way conversion, as I mentioned, that project is currently under construction. We've got a budget of $2.8 million to complete a two-way conversion of First and Second Street between Spruce and Main and I'm sorry, First and Second Street. Actually, the sections, except the sections on First Street between Spruce and Main, and the sections on 2nd Street between Spruce and Town Run Lane. The project is, like I mentioned, is under construction, and our next steps are that we are awaiting the new poles and installation with coordination with Duke Energy for the traffic signal reconfiguration. On the next slide, I think I show some pictures. Heather, if we can go to the next slide. So these pictures show some of the work that has been completed thus far. On 1st Street is a portion of a Strollway extension. This is along the section of 1st Street that could not be converted, or a section of 1st Street that, could not be converted, and we're extending the Strollway and a Strollway path on the left with that extra asphalt area to create a barrier for pedestrians along the corridor. And then 2nd Street shows some rehab work to the pavement that has occurred, so that once we've installed the poles, we will go through and actually resurface both 1st and 2nd Street to give a final smooth pavement, finally one that's needed on 1st Street in particular. I'm sure that all during the construction, you all have experienced how rough that roadway has been. And so one of the benefits of this project is that we will resurface those roadways, and it will be an overall smooth transition from the new pavement along Business 40 or Salem Parkway onto our surface streets of 1st and 2nd, and then eventually Liberty and Main. I think those were the only pictures I showed.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yes, ma'am.
I just had a thought, because we walked that path, the Strollway, a few weeks ago, and
Yes.
An improvement to that Strollway, not like paving wise, but and I don't know how this gets paid or who this goes to, but it needs some trash cans over there because people are walking their dogs, and we need somewhere to throw our trash when we're doing that. And so I don't know who, like, I tried to call 311 to make that request, but I never heard back from 311. I had to leave a message, but I'm just throwing that out there. Some improvements to that Strollway would be some visible trash cans.
We can definitely share that and look and see if there's any funding available with the improvements that we're currently making.
Great.
I know we added some benches, but I don't recall if we added any trash cans.
Yeah, there were none within a good portion of that.
Okay, thank you for that comment.
Yeah, thank you.
So the multi-use path, we've got actually 2 multi-use path projects, and we've split them up to call them the multi-use path east and the multi-use path west. The east portion is the portion that was originally designed to be included with the Salem Parkway project, which is from the Strollway Bridge, Liberty Street Strollway Bridge to Peters Creek Parkway. The overall funding for that is $3,380,350. Those dollars were going to be transferred to NCDOT to include it as a part of their project. But as I mentioned earlier, they were unable to initiate a change order due to their funding issues and the restrictions that were set for them by the Board of Transportation. And so those funds rolled back over to the city, and we are currently in the process of initiating that work. So because we were including it with the Business 40 project, it was in the STIP to be included in their for their project. So we're now having to move it out of their project into the STIP for the city to do it. And so we anticipate the Board of Transportation approving that change at either their April or May meeting. And once they do that, then NCDOT will give us authorization to proceed, and we can then begin moving ahead with advertising and getting that work constructed. So we're kind of on their schedule of trying to get that moved up ahead. Next slide. So included in this presentation, I added some pictures of the improvements that were made with the Salem Parkway project. So the top left corner is the strollway path that leads up to the Strollway Bridge from Liberty. The bottom left is the actual Strollway Bridge itself, and a picture of that improvement. And then the picture on the right shows the corridor that was left available for us to construct the Strollway alongside Salem Parkway, leading up to, this is actually leading up to the Green Street Bridge. Next slide, please.
Okay. All right, Keith. Well, you let me know something about that Lakeland piece.
I'll try to get up with.
So the multi-use path west is the portion of the strollway from Peters Creek Parkway to Lockland Drive. And so our MUP did receive, our MPO did receive some STPDA funding in the amount of $2.1 million. And then we're using the 2018 bond funds to match those federal funds in order to construct that corridor of the MUP. So we are waiting for an executed agreement from NCDOT. And once we receive that, then we can go ahead and begin conversations with the consultant that will do that design and get them under construction. And so once we have the okay and the executed agreement from NCDOT, then we can provide a better update of a schedule, but we can't start any conversations with a consultant until we have our executed agreement. This picture is a little bit more, it's a smaller picture, but if we zoom in, the reason I included it is because it kind of gives an idea of the proposed multi-use path along the Salem Parkway. And so if you start to the left, the portion that you see in green is the MUP West from Peters Creek Parkway to Lockland that we are currently talking about. And then if you continue on, and the red line on Peters Creek Parkway is the multi-use path that I showed in an earlier picture that was concluded with Business 40. The other portion of the red line that's going under Peters Creek Parkway was also constructed with the Salem Parkway project. As far as the there's a tunnel, I guess, that goes under Peters Creek Parkway. So all of that portion is completed. And then you see another other green lines that go from there, from the ballpark, and continues on up to Brookstown Avenue. So those are the portions that we will construct, and it's what we're calling our MUP East that we will construct once the project is added to the STIP. And then you see additional red lines, which were some wider sidewalks that were installed with the Business 40 project and funding that was included with that. And then another portion of a green line that will continue up to the Strollway Bridge. And again, that green line is a part of the MUP West that we will also include with the funding that we have.
So, I mean, when do you think all this will actually come to life and be finished? I mean, what's the time frame?
So the rough time frame, I think, is around 2022. But they're on two different schedules. The MUP East, we actually have designs completed. We just need it added to the STIP so that we can advertise for construction. The MUP West, we actually have to have a design done, and then we can then schedule for construction. So we anticipate the construction for the MUP East starting as soon as this summer is what we're hoping. But the MUP West may be a little bit longer because we don't anticipate having the design completed until maybe this fall. Next slide. All right, this one, streetscape improvements, phase 1. This project has a budget of $2 million, and the intent of those funds would be to implement streetscape projects that come out of the streetscape plan, which was adopted in 2020 by council. Right now, we have not had any projects identified. So once we have some recommended projects, then we will move ahead with any work on those. I think the intent was for the streetscape improvements to work cooperatively with maybe any improvements being made by developers and others in the downtown area, or as other improvements to any of the roadways in the downtown are made so that the streetscape aligns with the new plan that has been adopted. Next slide. Bike ped improvements. This funding is to fund any bicycle and pedestrian improvements that came out of our bicycle master plan. And also I added in conjunction with our pedestrian plan, which we've also just recently completed or is currently being completed. The budget is $1.4 million, and out of this, the funding so far, 2 projects have been utilized for safety corridor studies. One is the new Walkertown Road feasibility study, and the other is the Long Branch Trail feasibility study. The new Walkertown Road corridor study was a study that we were requested to look at the corridor itself because of the majority of pedestrians that are crossing along New Walkertown Road, the speed along the corridor itself, and just trying to see what improvements can be made to make that corridor a little bit safer for pedestrians. And then Long Branch Trail, that is a feasibility study that's working along with the TOD study that we have, looking at the Long Branch Trail corridor, and with intent to look at the that corridor and adding streetcar. So we did have some funding for the TOD study, but the actual Long Branch Trail design and feasibility could not be included with those federal funds, and so we used a portion of the funds to supplement that. And then East End Area Plan funds were to include improvements along 5th Street and improve streetscape improvements along 5th in the area between US 52 and Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. The full scope of that project was being worked with some other development projects that were going on, and so a final scope has not been developed. So none of the funding for that project has been utilized as of yet.
And what's the timing on that, you know, when you think that project may break ground?
That one I'm not sure. I'd have to check back with the manager's office to kind of see how that one is being scheduled, but it was working with projects by others that I haven't really been tied to. I guess that's it for me.
You can do these if you want to tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanique.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning,
Hope
Robert.
everybody's doing well this morning. I've got a couple here to update you on. This first one is Little Creek Greenway Phase 2. You may be aware we did Phase 1 probably, gosh, it's probably going on 4 or 5 years ago now, which runs from the Hilton Hotel there on Haynes Mall Boulevard down past Little Creek Little Creek Recreation Center, and then kind of dead ends behind some of those neighborhoods back there. So the intent of Phase 2 is to pick back up at that dead end. We're going to extend it about 3,500 feet. And the end of it now will be at Somerset Drive. It also includes a section of sidewalk from that end of the greenway that then ties it into the neighborhood that comes out on Somerset Drive right there. Budget for it's 1.5 million. We have completed the design and permitting for it, which was pretty complicated because we're in some wetlands and some marshy area back there. And we have now ordered appraisals for the property acquisition. So once we have those appraisals, we have to take those to council to get approval to acquire the property. We'll go through the property acquisition, and once that's complete, we can then bid the project and begin construction. And then second project is the Salem Creek Greenway / pedestrian path. The ultimate goal is to have some type of greenway that runs from Marketplace Mall all the way over to Forsyth Tech. That's a very, very complicated project. So this is kind of to help in the meantime until we can try to figure that greenway project out. What we are looking at doing is through a combination of widening sidewalks and installing bicycle lanes. We're creating a side path that runs from Marketplace Mall all the way over to the intersection of Laughlin Avenue and Silas Creek Parkway. We're currently under design on that. Last update, we were at 90% design, so they're just kind of detailing some of the last things on the plans. Next step, once we complete that design, is because we are dealing with Peters Creek Parkway and Silas Creek Parkway, we have to get approvals from NCDOT to do any of this work. So we have to get their approvals. If there's any property acquisition, we'll have to get appraisals and go through that process. And then we'll be ready to go out to bid on that one.
And then our last bond project overall, streets and sidewalks and the entire bond order, is Greenway development. This project was to create a reserve fund for future Greenway development. There's $800,000 in that, and it's currently under planning. No uses have been currently identified, but we'll keep you updated as plans are developed.
Will any of these funds be used for the planning of the Greenway from Marketplace to Forsyth Tech?
It's definitely, hopefully, our goal is to keep it within that budget that was set aside specifically for that project that Robert was just describing. But this, if that were to go over budget, this would be a place where we could potentially pull additional funds.
Again, because I got involved late, how were the projects determined? I mean, I guess I just have a question. The one from Marketplace to Forsyth Tech, I mean, who is that actually? What constituency is that serving?
It was a high priority of a council member at the time that the bond was being put together. Robert or Ben, can you say any more about who the goal of serving was with that one?
I mean, I can just address that with what Heather said. It was a very high priority of the council member at that time. It felt like there needed to be pedestrian and bicycle connection with Forsyth Tech.
Yeah, I think some of his goal was that the Forsyth Tech students would be able to potentially use it and be connected to other bus stops and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, to explain to me, I'm drawing a blank. If I'm at Marketplace Mall and I go on the greenway that currently exists, isn't that the one that goes all the way to Salem Lake?
It is, that's correct.
So it's a huge, it's a
Yes.
huge, it's not just create a little greenway from Marketplace Mall over to Forsyth Tech. It's
an
the ability to go
extension.
from Forsyth Tech all the way around Salem Lake, I think.
Mhm.
Yes.
That's correct, is to get them tied into the entire Greenway network.
Right, okay,
Okay.
that's what I thought. It makes more sense that way, I think.
Yep.
You're not
Yes.
just into the mall.
I was like, what?
Well, I've ridden that greenway before and I thought, I'm sure that's where we got on at Marketplace Mall.
Thank you for that, Gail. Mystery solved.
Are there any final questions about project updates?
Seems like we have a lot.
I
Thanks to
have
all
some
of you for doing
questions
that.
about from the last meeting. I don't know when that's appropriate on the agenda. Maybe after the stoplight report, it might answer some of them.
It's up to you, Gail. We can handle them now, or if you want to look at the stoplight report first, we can certainly do that.
Mr. Chair,
Why don't we look at the stoplight, and then whatever questions we'll have, we'll do that at the end, Gail. if that's
okay, sounds great.
Okay. So stoplight report is up next. I'm going to minimize this so I can see. Okay. So I know this is still a little small, but I want you to be able to see kind of the whole thing at once. Let me see if I can click it up one more. Yeah, not really. Okay. All right. You can see the majority of it here. So the biggest change or add this time are two items. One is highlighting in kind of a dusty green projects that are complete. So like our tennis court repairs are complete. So that one has been greened out. It's the only one so far, but as we get other ones that are done, you'll start seeing these turn that color, which will be really exciting to watch. Additionally, there was a request at a prior meeting to try and add stoplights for the MWBE information. So let me tell you about what I've done here, and you guys give feedback and I can make any changes going forward. So basically, I broke this out into two sections, design and construction. These gray lines are projects that are more likely than not going to go through the MWBE process based on the type of project and work that it is. So that's why those are grayed out. Some of these, like the tennis court repairs, we didn't do a design process. It went straight into construction. So that's grayed out for those projects. Then we've got a goal column and an actual column for both design and construction. So for goals, basically how the process works is the MWBE group kind of sets a goal that they're hoping that projects will achieve on the front end. And then so if the group that is getting the contract either for design or construction, if they met that goal that was initially set, that gets green. If they don't meet it initially and they have to go through the good faith effort process and submit their different affidavits and things, and they end up being contracted at a lower goal, then that gets a yellow stoplight. So we've moved forward, we've got the goal set, but it wasn't what we initially thought the goal should be. And then for
It's lower, correct?
Correct, it would be lower. If they end up contracting a higher goal, then I would just leave it green.
Okay.
Which does occasionally happen. For then the actuals, this is where the Jakira has check-ins with the project sort of as it's in process, where they submit how they've done so far. Those are typically those are typically below what the goal is. And so if we've had that check-in and it's coming in, the goal is 10%, and so far to that point in the project, 8% has been MWBE, then that would get a yellow light. And then once the project is complete, if they meet that goal, it would get changed to green. So do you want to look at an example or?
I was going to ask on the actuals,
Mhm.
and I understand the thought process behind the yellow in that category. I'm just trying to determine how helpful that is to this committee, because what this committee really should be concerned about is are they on track to hit the goal? You know, not necessarily where are they currently. You know, obviously Shakira and her group need to be very focused on that, but somehow or another, we need to be able to say either they're going to hit the goal that they were contracted to hit, or they're not. You know, and that's really, I think, where we're trying to get to on that.
I agree.
Yes.
Okay. So I believe, Jakira, correct me if I'm wrong, the numbers, when you have actuals listed partway through a project, you're doing a 50% check-in. Is that correct?
That would be for construction and repair projects.
Okay.
But I would say that we can currently only give what the actual percentages are at the time that I supply you the report. It's really hard to say if someone is on track to meet the goals, because for certain projects, MWBE participation occurs at different times during the phase of the project. So it may be that, for example, maybe halfway through where they were going to utilize MWBEs was in the latter part of the project. So it's really hard to kind of get where they are with meeting the goals. I can only give you where they currently are with utilizing MWBEs at the present time. Does that help clarify some of the questions?
It makes sense.
I mean, yeah.
Mark, if you don't mind, if I could jump in on what Jakira said, just to kind of give you an example. A lot of times on the construction projects, the paving is an MWBE and is a large chunk of the contract amount, but obviously the paving is one of the very last things to be done on the project. So it's hard to judge sometimes, you know, halfway through the project, whether they're on track or not.
Yeah, I understand the thought process. What I was hoping to do with this sheet is, you know, if there was something that was yellow or red for that matter, that would be a flag for us to talk about it. And so I think that when everything's yellow until the end, you know, that's not doing what we're trying to do there. And so maybe what I would suggest, Akira, if you think this is the right thing to do, is to say, let's leave off the actuals. If we're going to do it in the way that you're suggesting, which I understand the rationale behind, maybe we just leave that dot off until you're at the end. You know, we basically say, okay, did they achieve the goal in terms of when you went to contract, either a green or a yellow? I assume there's never going to be a red in that category because you won't contract with them in that
right
case.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it'll just be sort of, how did they do?
Correct. Yes, and we can do that. And so also at the end of projects, firms who do not achieve their contractual percentages, they're required to go through the good faith effort process. So for construction repair projects and for service related projects. So then at that time, you may see a red dot if someone did not demonstrate that they went through the efforts to seek out additional MWBE participation, if they weren't able to meet the goals during the project, and just to really demonstrate their efforts. So there may be some red dots. I hope that there aren't any red dots at the end of the projects. But like to your point, I think it probably will be helpful to either, we can possibly, with construction repair projects, we can definitely do 50% check-ins. And I guess the dots at that point probably could be helpful. But we don't conduct those type of check-ins for service-related projects.
So, Jakira, let me ask, what are the benchmarks, and you may have shared this with us earlier, to determine the degree of effort that's been made by a contractor? I mean, how do you know?
So the state's legislative authority has a good faith effort process where they require 50 out of 100 points for contractors to demonstrate a good faith effort. So it includes things like advertising the project in different diverse databases, sending out bid notifications to MWBEs in particular trades. But the city of Winston-Salem's MWBE good faith effort process is more stringent than the state's. We actually require contractors to achieve 115 points out of 180. And if you would like more detail, I can supply Heather a copy of the.
Because really, so they have to present, because you can require something, but how do you know they actually went through the steps? And that's what I was asking.
Yes, so they actually have to supply the documentation that they actually did these things to achieve the actual points. And the good faith efforts go through a preliminary review through the city's internal MWBE committee. And then the final review happens with the MWBE Citizens Advisory Committee. So they go through a really stringent process to actually prove their efforts.
Getting back to the original purpose of the extra sections in the dot secure, while we have you here today, are there any that are concerning to you on the list?
I would say no. With a lot of the projects being delayed or postponed, that is definitely going to affect their percentages that they currently either are achieving, or if there's scopes that change, that can definitely adjust the goals. But I would say that there are no projects that are currently alarming regarding MWBE participation.
Good
news.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me as I was putting this together was just, you know, a lot of our design firms were meeting the goal that were set. A few more of the construction ones had to go through the good faith effort process, which we had talked about at a previous meeting, just some of the challenges because of COVID and things like that, that we had seen a little bit of an increase in the good faith effort process. So just seeing that borne out in our data.
Yeah.
There's also just a difference in the way that those services are procured.
Mm-hmm.
In this, it's a little bit easier for the design firms to pick a team.
Correct. Yes.
It's the right team. So yeah, that's a good observation.
Yeah.
I do have one question, or I guess two questions. And Robert, maybe you're the one to respond to this. The red dots that are in the schedule columns, I'm assuming that's because of things being pushed out for COVID and some other items like that.
A lot of it's COVID. We've also, which I'm sure you're very aware, we're getting some disturbing pricing trends on some of the stuff coming in. Like we held off on bidding fire station number 3 until we bid fire station 13, just to try to get a feel of where the prices are coming in. Lumber and steel prices are having an impact on what we're doing. We have now moved forward where we've got fire station 3 out on the street, keeping our fingers crossed, but just hearing some stuff that makes us wonder if we may have to pull it back and maybe redesign, or maybe wait and see if the volatility kind of cools down in 6 or 8 months.
Yeah, it is definitely a uncertain time right now in construction pricing.
And you can see on the explanations that I've pulled up on the screen share, some of those explanations for those red lights. So you get kind of a good array of them with those very first 3 even of, you know, holding one bid back because we wanted to see how prices were coming in, having another one that went out that then we had to value engineer back the design because the bid was too high. And then having another one that was delayed due to COVID-19 and a contractor needing to quarantine, putting kind of a delay in. So that shows you a little bit of the array of why some of those are changing.
And then Heather, would you mind scrolling down to the Easton Park restrooms?
Yes.
Yes.
That was one that there was a red dot in the budget.
Correct. I've gone too far. Hold on. Here we go.
What is the reason for the over budget on that one?
Basically, the laying the sewer line that's needed to get from the restroom to the current to the existing sewer outfall is just very expensive, and the estimate of all of that is over budget. So we're trying to find additional funding to complete that work.
I guess on that one, if you go back to that stoplight report, that's the only one that has a red in a budget column.
Mhm.
Whereas the others it sounded, Robert, like you were maybe addressing some of that prior to it going to contract.
We are.
Was there a reason that one just went forward? Does this need to happen now, or what's the thought there?
The Easton, we actually have not bid that one yet. The design is complete, and the final estimate that came in for the design is what's over budget. And the nature of that project is it's a pre-engineered restroom building, so it's about as inexpensive as we can get, and then it has to have a sewer line. So for that project to be a complete project, there's almost nothing that can be value engineered or cut from it. So our only solution is to find additional funding for it before we go out to bid.
Gotcha.
Now, we talked about that one at our last meeting.
Mhm.
I mean, so has there been progress made?
Well, and my initial idea and hope on this is we're waiting to bid Salem Lake Phase 2 and see where we come in on that. That is in the same ward as Easton Park. So if there are some savings or additional funds from Salem Lake, one of the easier solutions would be just to transfer those funds over to Easton.
Okay.
So unfortunately, we've got some dominoes that have to fall before we know exactly where we're going.
Right.
So I gather that the construction prices are really just out the roof. There's no regulation given where we are, is what I hear.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I had one contractor tell me that his steel supplier called him and said, if you need some steel, order it today, because Amazon just contacted me and told me they will buy every bit of steel we have in stock.
You are kidding.
No.
Amazon, you mean people are buying steel through Amazon?
Well, no, for what they're building, for all of their buildings.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, for their build, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we got notification yesterday, Brenda, that if you need steel bar joist or steel decking, if you ordered it today, you would not get it in 2021.
Oh my gosh.
My good, this is unreal. Is this because of the pandemic?
I think it's a number of things. I think it's mainly lack of supply and a lot of demand right now.
Yeah.
And consolidation in the industry has not helped that.
Well, I know Lowe's and Home Depot have done very well based on their earnings and the things I've read about them, because people, not only, I guess, big contractors, but all contractors are doing a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Were there other projects? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Robert.
Well, I was just going to say, it does not seem like the pandemic has affected the construction market. We thought it would slow down, and it's our inspections division is setting records for the number of permits coming in.
Wow.
Yeah. Were there
That
other?
doesn't help pricing.
No, it doesn't.
That's a simple one.
Yeah,
Were there?
somebody's making money.
Were there other projects that folks wanted to look at the explanations or have more conversation about?
Yeah,
Gail,
that
this
was,
is a good time.
is this my time?
I
Okay,
think this would be a good time.
you've answered a couple of them, but I just wanted a little clarification. When Mr. Royston was here and talked about the security improvements at the various rec centers, there were the major ones that had been completed, and then the other ones, which were smaller projects. We didn't have any idea about a time frame. It said it would be done with the when the RFPs were issued, and I'm just wondering where that stands.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up. So what I had pulled up before that you were looking at the playbook was our static version. So let me try and pull up the interactive one and see if there is a recent update from Recreation on that.
Okay.
Yeah, my internet's thinking really hard, guys. Okay.
I know we visited this earlier, but could we just revisit why it went from the city was going to handle to now it's going to be put out for bid?
That was a decision. So our IS department and the recreation department were working together on that project. And I think just workload wise, the IS department felt like they needed the additional support of contracting it out versus handling it in-house.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got the project pulled up. Let me see here. Yes. Okay, the update is still from January, so that they were working on getting a contractor and getting that through council. So I don't have any more specific information on that one. I'll make a note though to make sure that we get some additional information for our next meeting.
And then my last question, since most of them have already been answered, has to do with the COVID funding. And I know that we said that we had extended to some of the organizations the time frame for, and I'm just wondering if you're feeling like the all the organizations are going to be able to spend the funds that were allocated even with that extension of time.
Ben, can you take that one?
Ben had to leave the meeting for another meeting.
Okay.
Well, how about this? If there are any that we feel aren't going to be able to, is that something that we can be apprised of?
Yes, we can definitely have an update. Well, I'll make sure that we put an update on the COVID funding on your next agenda so that we can do that.
Now,
Thank you.
That was the funding from the first cycle of granting.
Yeah, yes. Having been through cycle 2, yes.
Having been through the hell of cycle 2.
I just want to celebrate cycle 1 that everybody got their money and they spent it all and everybody's happy. I know when they said we get a final report, but I'm just curious as to whether we've run into any challenges.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on the stoplight report?
No, thank you for putting it together. I know that was a lot of work for everybody.
Thanks, Heather.
Okay, and I'm going to stop sharing.
I have a general question.
Yes.
If I know we have lost Daisy, and I just heard it in one of our meetings. Are we replacing her? And the reason that I ask is that there's someone that I had in mind that might be a great addition to this committee, who and she is Hispanic. So is that the right, am I asking the right question?
Patrice, can you speak to the appointment process?
Yes, Brenda, you can have her to apply online to be a part of this committee. It goes to the mayor's office, so Linda Barnes will receive the application. It then has to go on an agenda where they are voted in. We actually just voted in, I think, Monday, a slate of new committee members. But absolutely, just encourage her to just go ahead and apply, and we can get her set up. She'll have to go through, a series of trainings, the ethics training and harassment training, but it should be fine.
I have not said anything to her, but she has been someone that I think would be a phenomenal addition to this committee, particularly I think we need that representation.
Yes, that would be great. Absolutely. And we can get her caught up to speed, because this committee is a little bit longer term than some of our others. So
I'll reach out to her today then. Thank you.
Okay. And Mark, can I just make a comment?
Of course.
Okay, thank you. Just before we leave, I did want to just personally thank each of you for this kind of part 2 of reviewing applications for our community investments for social justice and anti-poverty. I know it was a lot, and 118 applications that you all took the time to review. So we greatly appreciate it. I personally just appreciate each of you for your contributions towards those allocations. So I know it wasn't easy, but we got through it. The item was approved on Monday night. It was a 6-2 vote. And so we're done with it. I will notify the agencies either the end of this week or maybe early next week of their award, and then we'll start that process with contracts.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. I appreciate everybody's time and energy that they put into that. It was a little bit of a challenging approval process. And I know Gail and Brenda were able to be there at the council meeting or on the Zoom at the council meeting to hear that. So thank y'all for the time you put into it. We will have some conversations with the councilmen and the mayor, and just, you know, hopefully if this type of thing comes up again, they'll be able to give us a little bit more guidance as to what their intention is. Because I think we probably might have approached that a little differently if we knew that to start with. And I think the councilmen and women said that when we presented to finance. So again, thanks for everybody's time.
Can I make a comment about the stage 2 as well? And it's really, I'd like to say something that, just to kind of start a conversation. If it were to come around again, I'm completely satisfied with how we allocated the dollars. I totally agree with Mark's sentiments. But having gone through this process twice now, something struck me during our last meeting before it went to finance. And it wasn't until after the meeting that I really kind of reflected on it and thought that I would at least bring it up to this group and for the possibility of conversation in the future. I kind of just came down after the last meeting before finance that if any one of the members of our committee finds themselves in a position where they need to recuse themselves from voting because they're maybe on the board or, you know, directly, you know, employed with a group that is applying for money, I personally would like just to have a conversation about the possibility that that member of our committee work with that organization during their application process, so that on the day of our meeting, when we're going to, you know, have input and everything, I'd like them to consider recusing themselves for advocating at the meeting for that group, because every organization doesn't have the ability to come advocate to us that day, unless I'm wrong about that. And when Ben mentioned during the last meeting that there was a woman who it was a public meeting from Trellis who was listening, and it struck me. And then afterwards I went, well, but that woman didn't get to make her case to us that day of why Trellis. She couldn't add input to the application. And yet sometimes I think, you know, there are members of this committee that are strong advocates and great advocates for the organization. But I'm thinking we should really maybe have that advocacy be before, versus, you know, you've got 118 people and only 3 or 4 groups can be advocated for a second time beyond the written application. And it's not something I think we need to deal with today. But if we do it again, I would like to have that conversation.
Mark, can I say something?
Of course.
I've been involved with a number of different grant processes throughout my volunteerism. And I think, Ryan, to your point, we have to be very, very careful what our involvement is, particularly for boards and nonprofits that we sit on. And I think that because this is a public forum and people can listen in, I just have to push back a little on the fact that 118 grants, if we had 118 people who wanted to step up and advocate on their behalf, I think that that's why we're entrusted to do the due diligence and to bring to the table the things that we brought in this last process. I mean, we spent a lot of time combing through all of those grants. And so I think that is why we have been entrusted in any board that I've been on or any grant process that I've been involved in. As a member, you are charged with doing all of that due diligence. And it's fine, even if there's somebody that you can talk to gather more information to bring into that process. That is a more effective way, because it's a slippery slope if you start doing anything else. You have to be fair. My concern, and I was very concerned that we were left out in the cold, so to speak, because there was an advocacy that from the council, maybe we should only have awarded to 5, let's say, as an example, organizations, or 10. And that, to me, for the general public, for the nonprofit organizations, that is a very negative message to send. Because if that is what was expected, we should have been told that up front. If that is what is expected, you should also tell I believe, those who are applying for the grant. So I think that our process, given what we had to work with, was absolutely spot on. And it's unfortunate the things that unfolded. You know, I think we do have a responsibility as a member, as I did, to disclose I sit on this board. But I don't think that we need to entertain that whole notion. I've never, in my experience of years of dealing with this kind of thing, had that to happen, unless it was open to everyone to come in prior to the decision-making process to state their case in any way.
And if you're going to do that with 118 groups, I think most of us would say count us out, because we don't have, we don't have that kind of time.
And I guess I would never recommend.
Thank you, Brian.
118 people get to come in and do that. I guess I'm kind of saying we're not going to have 118. So I don't know if we should have any within the meeting.
Well, but you can't, if you open that door, you can't say who can or who won't.
Right.
It's a possibility. And you'll never have just a dozen grantees or grant requests. You will always have in the hundreds.
Well, I think this is very relevant discussion, because with the city getting all the funds coming from the whatever that affordable, whatever reinvestment act coming, I'm praying that they're not going to ask us for involvement in that. But I do think our comments about setting up what your expectations are in the beginning is very viable. You know, tell us what you're trying to accomplish, and that'll give us some guidance as to, you know, what we could do. I think part of our feeling as a group was, let's look at all these organizations, let's get the money out into the community, into the grassroots folks who are on the ground and know what's going on, rather than give it to just a couple. But if that was not the expectation, we could have adjusted.
But I'll be honest with you, you know, after the finance committee meeting, which I found very interesting, to be honest with you, again, it was the first time I've ever been in touch with the government in that way. I heard what they said, and then I went back and thought about how we did it, and I still came down on we did it correctly.
I thought so too.
Our process was a good process. It just didn't align with what some or all of the council members were anticipating, you know, but if we don't know that, then they don't get to say that.
Well,
let's be clear. Let's be clear that majority of the council members supported your recommendation.
Yes,
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
You know, one person, but there was not a collective directive for how you all should allocate these resources before you started to do that. I think in, you know, certain council members, everyone has an opinion about what they think the outcome should be. Absolutely. But yeah, unless that is communicated and the committee knows, okay, come out with 5 agencies, that would be the directive you would have been given. But there was not a collective directive. So we knew there were certain opinions, but at the end of the day, you had 6 members to vote in favor of your recommendation. So don't think this is the entire council's feelings about it.
Good point.
Any other comments on on that process or anything we need to discuss as it relates to that today?
Nope.
Okay. Well, with that being said, I think we have reached the end of our agenda for today's meeting. Anything else just globally that we need to talk about before we adjourn?
No, Wake Forest announced their opening campus in Charlotte this morning.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That was
Mhm.
big news.
Yeah,
Lucky Charlotte.
Yeah.
Hey, we need more doctors, more medical schools, more doctors.
Wait, Charlotte now has an extension of what we have.
Let's hope it stays the dominant stuff here. That's my long-term concern. We're not recording, I assume, anymore since we're officially off the clock, but that's my long-term. I've been worried about this for 25 years.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
We just got to do everything